oftentimes the people that don't know anything taste the best because there's no pretension in terms of, I might say the wrong thing. You say whatever you want. And there's so many people that taste, what I tell them is there's so many people that taste so many different ways, by color, by moments, by smells, by sounds. You can relate it to whatever you know, and that's okay. And that's the beauty of it.
Welcome to Uncorking What's Next. I'm your host, Jeff Zacharia. I've spent 40 years in the wine world, and right now may be the most exciting time to be in it. For 4 decades, I led Zacchi's, one of the most trusted names in wine. Along the way, I met winemakers, collectors, and thinkers who changed how I see this world. Because wine has always been more than what's in the glass. It's about connection, curiosity, and the stories we share. I'm really enjoying uncorking its future together with you. When people talk about great wine estates, they often focus on one bottle, the vintage, the scores, the labels. But the longer I've been around this world, the more I've come to believe that the truly great estates are about stewardship. Today's guest, Sarah Hwang of Domaine Huet, understands this better than most. Her family became caretakers of one of the most important estates in the Loire Valley, a winery whose history stretches back nearly a century and whose vineyards have roots that run far deeper than that. Yet what struck me most in this conversation was that there was no talk of ratings, rarity, or prestige. It was Sarah's belief that wine is ultimately about people, places, and memories. Growing up in New Jersey, listening to her parents tell stories about South Africa and South African wines, she learned that wine could be a window into a much wider world. Today, she carries that same spirit at Domaine Huet, one of the world's great expressions of Chenin Blanc. In this conversation, we uncork the remarkable history of Huet, explore why Chenin Blanc may be one of the most misunderstood grapes, and discuss what it means to care for a vineyard whose story began long before you arrived. This is a conversation about legacy, patience, and the responsibility of leaving something better than you found it. Let's get into it. Today's episode is brought to you by La Tête d'Or, the French-American steakhouse from legendary chef Daniel Boulud in Manhattan's Flatiron District, serving one of the best lunches in New York. I had the pleasure of working with Chef Boulud over the years, hosting wine auctions together at Restaurant Daniel and dining at many of his amazing restaurants. I've never been disappointed. So I was very excited to see what he's created at La Tête d'Or. It brings together the spirit of classic American steakhouse with refined French flair. Great steaks, incredible seafood, and a fantastic wine list. If you're in New York and looking for a memorable lunch, La Tête d'Or is absolutely worth a visit. It gets my highest recommendation. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Look, I was excited for this episode before I started doing my homework. And as I was studying it, I got even more excited because there's such an interesting history here from one of my favorite domains. For listeners who don't know, Domaine Huet is considered one of the defining, if not the defining estates in Vouvray. And in my opinion, it's one of the greatest white wines in the world. They make 3 main wines. They make a dry, a demi-sec, and a milieu. And the demi-sec is off dry, and to me, there's a sweetness to it, but it's balanced by a razor-sharp Loire acidity. And the milieu is the full sweet expression. It's honeyed, it's lush, and built to age for decades. Huet was founded in 1928, I believe, by Victor Huet, right, who fought in World War I. And I guess what I read is he struggled because of the gas war and stuff like that. After the war, it was a difficult time for him. And then his son took over. And his son is who I met. And he was the person who, for many years, was so driven to really grow Vouvray as an important brand out there, right? Yeah. He was the mayor of Vouvray, for 40 years or so. It was incredible. His legacy, what he's done for Vouvray and Huet is really incredible. You guys got certified organic in 93, and then you guys took over in 2003.
My family were very lucky to be a part of this really beautiful story. And I think that is actually the reason that we're here. It's to be able to carry on this legacy of now, I would say, this family that's really important within kind of the community here locally in Vouvray. Like you said, Gaston was the mayor of Vouvray from 1947 to 1989. Amazing. It's a small village. It doesn't just happen by chance. He was a special person, And
he was that kind of person, right? He had that big personality.
Well, I've never met anybody that's met him that doesn't have some sort of really profound or touching or marked experience with him. I'm in contact with the family and his daughter, Jacqueline, who's his oldest daughter, born before the war. And she has that same energy, and it's really nice. Yeah. And then we were certified biodynamic in 1993 before it was the cool thing to do.
As I was reflecting on that, I don't even think in 93, because, I've been in the wine business for 40 years.
Yeah.
I don't think I was so focused or so aware of what that meant at that time. And you guys are already certified.
Yeah, I don't think, if you ask anybody what it means today, even biodynamic farming, it depends. Everybody has their own relationship with it. Even within our team, everybody has its own relationship with it. It's a philosophy after all. But it's really just how we work. The winery has never used chemical fertilizers or pesticides. So in a sense, while it was a discovery, an exploration of sorts, it was sort of a natural test. We'll wait and see, right? There's so many unknowns. That's kind of the beauty of it. You don't have to know exactly why. There are so many things with what we do on all sides of the wine thing, and you can't explain it, but it's just the way it is. And sometimes you have to be okay with that. Yeah.
And that's the beauty and the charm. That's what I love about the industry. And clearly I can see already you do as well. But let's go way back to the beginning.
Sure.
When you were growing up, did your parents work outside the home?
Yeah, they did. When I was really young, my mom stayed home with us. So I was born and raised in New Jersey. Born down the shore, raised in north central Jersey. Some people say that doesn't exist, but I say it does. in a really small town. That's actually, in terms of population, probably the size at the time, at least, of Vouvray. My dad was went over to the U.S. when he was 15 for university from the Philippines. Both my parents were born in the Philippines.
At 15, at an early age.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy when I think about it today. And then, once I have a brother, Hugo, when we got older and, didn't need as much attention and we were in school and stuff, and my mom got back to work. Was there wine served at your table when you were growing up? Always. Yeah, wine has always been a part of our family's conversation, a part of our family's thing, but it's not necessarily just wine itself. It's how wine is all encompassing. I come from a family of nerds, and there's one side where it's the combo of all the hard sciences. My mom's a mathematician, computer scientist. My father has his PhD in physics. And so it's all of the sciences that come together, and you don't know anything, and it's purely enjoyable, and it's all about sharing, right? That was really that was the approach we grew up in terms of how we thought about wine.
And it's interesting because I've interviewed a couple other people whose parents, women specifically, even Laura Catena. Do you know Laura Catena from Catena Vineyards?
Sure. I don't know her personally, but yeah.
Her father, when she was in medical school, gave her an American Express card just to buy wine.
Well, that's very generous.
and then she bought wine out of curiosity, but only drink it when he was in town. It was his way of continuing to, even though she was going off into a different career, to instill that.
But even kind of before that, my parents lived, before my brother and I were born, they lived in South Africa. They lived in Cape Town.
Oh.
It was 76 to 78. During apartheid, my dad was a professor in applied math at University of Cape Town. My mom got her master's there. There's a rumor, and I think it's true, that my mom was the first non-white to get a degree from the University of Cape Town. And I've always said you should be more famous, or famous in general.
Absolutely.
I'm very proud of that. When we were growing up, they would talk about, for me, wine is sort of like this. It's about exploration and imagination, right? You're drinking stuff from afar. You don't really know where these places are even, or who these people are. And my dad had already been introduced to the concept of wine in his time in the U.S. stateside. And it's where they found out that my mom has an amazing palate.
Nice.
Right? Growing up, though, we would hear about this unimaginable place, like stories of just humans with like pure kindness, these beautiful landscapes. Even to this day, if you bring up like Constantia and Stellenbosch, their eyes just light up and they get swoony, right? That's the vision I have when they were explaining about their experiences there. And so, alongside that, they're explaining about the wines that they tasted, or just their experience in discovery, and talking about then meeting people from all walks of life, especially during apartheid. We got it all. And that vision of my parents kind of explaining their time there is inked in my memory, like the faces and stuff. And so that's where that connection is. It's not just wine. And I think that's that's our relationship as a family. That's our relationship today with wine, is that it's like the people and the place and the history and everything that's come together to get to this point. It's very cheesy.
No, not just the opposite. and for me, it tingles my skin because I started this podcast because I have the same passion for wine, and I want to, and one of my goals is to share exactly those over a screen. You can't really share it over a screen, but to share some of that passion and love to try to get other people as in love with the industry as clearly we both are. And this was not scripted. We've never met before, but but I have that same love for this industry. And now that I'm less involved in Zacky's, this was my goal.
In wine, it can be whatever you make of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a story behind it.
Both your parents clearly have a passion for wine.
Yeah.
And they instilled that on you and your brother?
Absolutely. Very lucky, my brother and I, to be raised in a family that traveled a lot. We would go back to the Philippines to visit our extended families. So those are really long trips for real little kids. And so a trip across the pond was nothing for us. And so we would come to Europe and walk. Wow. Right. And walk and just look and see and explore and learn. We went to Budapest. Hungary is known for its Tokaj, one of the oldest winemaking regions in the world. It was the king of wine, the wine of kings. It's traditionally been most famous for its asus, sweet dessert wines. When we were there in 96, we were on the Buda side and trying wines from 89, 92, right? Because Tokaj needs 3 years to age before it can be released. My parents just looked at us and said, these are crazy. They're so complex and there's so much going on. And they're also bred of vines that have been abused for decades.
Yeah.
The soils haven't been worked. The yields were insanely high.
Your parents are they're not just math nerds, they're wine nerds as well.
For sure. It's a nerdy family, like I said. Yeah. We're pretty nerdy about anything. Anything. It's sort of an issue. So we packed up into a little car and drove out to Tokaj and knocked on some doors and there's not much between Budapest and Tokaj, but then you get close and you see the rolling hills. My dad said, I think this is where we want to follow that pipe dream. We should. And so my mom's an angel and was like, I agree. We cannonballed. There's no other word for it. We bought already planted vineyard sites. Partnered up with a local winemaker. So our first winemaker was Ishvan, and then bought a building on which the winery sits. It was the old summer manor of the Habsburgs and the Rákóczis, and it was in shambles. We restored it back to its original structure, and there were cellars underneath, and the adventure began. All with respect. That's why we were there, but also it's just this big sized passion project, science project. So we decided we're going to do what we think how asu shows best, which is at least 6 Petonio Shasu, which is sort of the highest level of asu before you talk about asu essencia and essencia. And then we took a few years to get to know what the terroirs could give us and figure out what was going on. And sort of the idea was, if these vines in this place can produce such incredible sweet dessert wines, what could that look like in other wine types?
Oh my God, amazing.
And it was just this year that somebody said to me, because it is true, we were the first to start producing a ferment sec. And ferment sec is an homage to Huet because we had already become involved. And sec is obviously a French word. And we use the press program, and it's that. But you see so many dry ferments and all these other types of ferment and sparkling. It's pretty cool that is our little contribution to that part of the wine world, in that we were the first to start that.
And then in 2003...
The Huet family, like you said, moved to Vouvray in 1928. They needed cleaner air for Victor, and they found the manor of Olieu that came with 6 hectares of vine. Just really quickly, because it's a really incredible story, is that, the first vintage was in 1929, 1930, 1931, there's no harvest because of hail, which is like a great reminder that it's always, there's always complications. Nature's crazy, right? The plan was for Gaston to take over in 1938. Around then, he was working with his dad, but then he gets drafted, and then he becomes a prisoner of war from 1940 to 45.
5 years, yeah.
He comes back. The government disbanded at the time. Once the war was over, the government disbanded, and during the first elections, that's where the war hero is elected mayor. None of the 3 Huet children were directly involved with the winery. The generation after wasn't in wine either. And so, in 2002, Gaston is 92 years old. And it was also at a time when we as a winery had encountered a few complicated vintages. The wine world was changing. It's becoming more global. Wasn't as pure, I would say, in terms of intentions. And so we were introduced to the Huet family by our U.S. importer at the time, Bob Chatterton.
Oh, I knew Bob very well.
I'm sure you did.
He came to my wedding.
Oh, that's funny. And so, I think that there were a few suitors, some French, mostly French, some not, families, companies, co-ops. I'd like to believe that the decision to kind of allow us to become a part of this story was because they saw, this family of 4 from New Jersey. That doesn't make any sense. Like, what is happening? Right? I mean, I take all responsibility in the continuity of that with my family, but their roots are in Tokaj, right? So there's a respect for sweeter styles. There's a respect for history. It's not about where the wines are going, who's doing what, how much is this, this is a good chance that the legacy will continue respectfully.
I could see a Netflix miniseries here with this whole story and your family. No, I think it's a great story.
No, it's scary.
Because there was some controversy, which I'm not defending, but I'm not surprised about.
I was surprised by it, actually. There was controversy. There wasn't a lot of controversy in 2003 when the sale went through. I think there were more so questions, of like, what is this going to mean? Who are they? What are they? What's going to happen? Which I understand because Huet is a story. It has its place in the Loire Valley, in the wine world. So I completely understand that question. It's human. It's normal. And then I think people realize that we're pretty quiet. And then that kind of stopped. The noise came when Noël decided to retire in 2012.
Right. And Noël, just to remind everyone who Noël was.
Yeah, so Noël was Gaston's son-in-law that moved back from Paris, or he's a local. Him and Marie-Françoise met locally. They were in Paris and they married in 1968, came back here 71, and Noël started working with Gaston in 1972.
So you guys kept him on.
He's an iconic figure who's contributed so much to this story and the wine world. And for us, it's like you make that quote unquote investment for a reason. It's because we appreciate and respect what's been done. The reality is also it's never just about one person, which is what people forget all too often in this wine thing that we do, that it's not just one person. Unless you have a very small production, it's a team.
Yeah, right? It takes a village.
In all senses. And so everybody kind of has their own version of it, and there's actually no scandal. When he decided to retire, I think he was 66 or 67. Everybody's like, he's retiring early.
He's actually retiring late in France.
And so that became sort of a thing. 2 kids from the U.S. that nobody had ever really seen before or seen in passing. And it got kind of dirty and complicated. But the reality is it was pretty simple. Transition is a part of life. Change is also a part of life.
Of course. Change is an important part of life. I just want to emphasize
that. Well, what I say is, like, if you don't change, you're stagnant. Within the wine world, I do feel as though it has a very negative connotation. And I do try to fight against that. It's like, let's give people a chance. You don't know. Change is okay. What we decided as a family and as a team here was that at the end of the day, our story will be told through our wines. Everybody can decide if they like that story, they like those wines or not, but that's where we're going to concentrate. Words are words, and people can throw words around. We can't control their thoughts or any of that. What we can control is the story that we want to tell, and that's going to be through our production. That's going to be through our relationship with the vineyards and the vines. And I think that for us internally, that really worked.
When Noël retired, I guess that's when you came on?
I've been out here it'll be 15 years in January. But if you asked me 15 years ago, if I would ever be living in France running the winery, I would probably tell you, no, you're nuts. But at the same time, my family is that. We're nomadic, we're dreamers. I'm the product of the American dream. And I appreciate that. So it was in January 2012 that my brother and I moved out here. When we announced that move to our friends, everybody said, all right, that's crazy. For how long? And the answer was like, we don't know. And it's been quite the adventure. It's actually gone by pretty fast.
What I'm also hearing is the gratitude.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that. You know, you can get caught up in all of the stresses. We're farmers, seasons go by quickly. There's always some sort of climatic catastrophe. So to kind of take those little moments to appreciate them, those almost little wins. Perspective is really important, perspective in humanity. So to recognize what got you here. And so especially when we're talking about the different wines and the different vintages, so often it's like, okay, what happened in this vintage and who's doing this? And it's like, this wine exists because those vines were planted, in 1964. There have been generations of people working this vineyard site, these soils, these vines, pruning every year to get us to this point, right? And that's the generational DNA of what ends up in the glass. We don't know what's going to be pulled in any given vintage, but there's something from the past that goes into the wines, right? And so, I think it's important to recognize that.
And I think something that you said that really resonated with me, we came in and left things the way they are.
Yeah, because, people have asked me, what mark do you want to make? I don't need to make a mark. It's not about that. Clos du Bourg is one of the oldest vineyard sites in the appellation of Vouvray. It dates back to 372. For us to presume that we're going to make any sort of significant mark is pretty egotistical. We are allowed to work this land and do the best we can to show the terroir through each vintage, through the different wine types when we can make them. But it has its own story. We're just a couple pages and maybe a chapter.
You're a steward. You're a steward for this amazing land.
Precisely.
Right?
And our job is to make sure, and I've said this before, that their grammar's good, that the punctuation, all the T's are crossed, the I's, there's a period, and that we leave a story for the future to tell as well.
And I love how you describe it, because only a nerd would describe it that way, with making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. It's brilliant. My daughter, who's a proud nerd as well, would totally relate to that. I love that. So let's just talk about biodynamics for another minute, because I know you,
Sure.
As we said, you're one of the earliest certified. So what does that actually mean for you guys? And is most of Vouvray biodynamic? What happens with the interaction with the neighboring vineyards?
I think in the beginning, from what I've heard and, in exchanges that I've had, it was like, you're doing what? Right? It was kind of the cuckoo crazy thing to do.
Laura Catena said a similar thing, actually.
Not everybody was organic or biodynamic at the time, and not everybody is today. For most of our parcels, Vouvray is an appellation of different villages, and all of our vineyard sites are in the town of Vouvray, and most of our neighbors are organic now, so it's changed. What does it mean to us? It's just how we work. It's a respect to the environment. I'm not the person, and as a team, we're not the people that say this is the best way to do it. I think that everybody is working and farming in the way that they think is best. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing that. And so that's okay. But it's what works for us. And like I said earlier, everybody has their own relationship to it. There's the part that's very simple in that, if you think about the constellations and the moon, it's based off of the lunar cycle, that we know that the moon controls the tides and water, and humans and plants are well over 95% water. So that would be silly if we think that we weren't affected. Our hair grows longer when the moon is rising. Our nails grow longer. Everybody on the team gets a haircut at the full moon. But, just something as simple as that, of course, there's an effect. And if you were to trace the growth of the vine itself over the lunar cycle, it's basically like a wave.
Omri Ram from Lafleur talked about walking the vineyards, as you talk about, and listening to them and actually hearing what they have to say to him. Do you have a similar experience?
That's very interesting. I at times have been known to give them words of encouragement.
Okay, sure.
It's very nice just to be with them. Somebody said that her son, rather than take photos, he records sound bits. A bird chirping, kids playing, water flowing, and that's his memory. Everybody has their own way of communicating, for sure.
These days, people hear the word, even in my experience, demi-sec, and they get anxious. They get a little worried. I love your demi-sec, and I think it's one of the most important wines that you make. But how do you present that in a way that's successfully getting people excited about it?
It's like if a baby falls or a kid falls and they look at their parents for reinsurance and they see the panic in their eyes, then they start crying. right? So if somebody talks about a demi-sec and they see the panic in the person's eyes, then they're taking that as a judgment, and I shouldn't be liking this. This idea of what it means to have some residual sugar in wine, it's showing off the depth of, or the breadth of the aromatic profile of Chenin, and that it can produce wines that are balanced, and balanced in all sense of the words, where the sugar actually adds depth on the palate, which allows, for example, the demi-sec, there is kind of a slight sweetness. I would call it more fruitiness. And then the wine's finished dry. And that's what we kind of consider to be balanced, is there's nothing ever too much. It's just enough. But you can always follow it up by either another sip of the same thing or of something else. It's hard for people to drink what's not being made or proposed to them. The wine consumer, their experience in wine goes in waves. We spend some time in Bordeaux and Burgundy. We go over to the Loire Valley. And then at some point we come back to the whites and then to the sweets. And kind of that's the progression, because there's always something to discover. Us specifically, we've been very steadfast in maintaining that. It's probably what we're most proud of. Is it maybe harder work? Yeah, but it's about communication. And if people know that, we're doing this, because what you can be almost certain about is that if you have a glass of this in front of you, it's going to be friendly and drinkable and finished dry and really enjoyable and food friendly. Also, kind of the basis of biodynamics is balance and harmony. So if you push for something on the harvest end, at some point down the road, you're going to see that imbalance in the glass. Our wines are known for their ageability. It's the 90th birthday of Vouvray as an appellation this year, so I've been going through the archives, and there are accounts that Gaston Huet wrote about, drinking wines from the 1850s, or having the 1830s, or having like the 1853 and 1953, and it's not every winemaking region that can do that. Very often it's with the sweeter styles, because the sugar holds the structure and the personality of the wine and the vintage better.
And you lose some, as the wine ages, it will lose some of that sweetness.
How you perceive the sugar changes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so
right.
It's on us as well to carry that forward and to begin with, to continue it and explain to folks why these wines are so special. And it doesn't take a lot either. Try them.
It's so important to get people to try these wines, because once they try them, then it's much easier to just convince them how great they are.
Yeah, they're very friendly, and it's a style that we make it because it's what we enjoy.
Domaine Huet has such an amazing identity. It's so strong, both in the primary market and, in the auction market. If you go visit a cellar, your wine is in so many of those cellars, and for good reason. Nice. And it's important to maintain that, as you say, as a steward of this vineyard for many generations forward. I think that's key. So let's talk about what's next. What are you uncorking next? Is there some way that you're focusing on the next generation, how they're discovering wine?
We're really excited to get to know our 2025 vintage. Since the last day of harvest, we have literally just been saying we can't wait to meet them. We can't mess them up, but we can't wait to meet them. And it's just because for us, it was you hear so often about special harvest conditions, special seasons that turn into special harvests, that turn into special grapes. If there was any vintage that was that for us, in front of our eyes, and even when we talk about the energy of the vineyard sites and how they felt, it was 2025 for us. So we're really excited about it. The people that nobody hears about on the team, they're leaving their legacy through these wines as well, and people forget that. And I think that there's a lot of pride from the folks in our team in that fact. To think that people all around the world, all random corners of the world, might be having a glass of our wine or a bottle, or opening a bottle with whatever they're eating. That thought is very exciting. I think it's probably a motivating factor.
I think that's beautiful. As you stepped into this role as an American, as a woman, how has it been like for you in managing that? How have you navigated that? Have certain doors been harder to open than other doors?
Doors are as heavy as you make them, is what I've ended up believing. And if they're too heavy, they're not worth opening. It's been a really great adventure. There have been some complicated times that weren't the easiest. I'm an Asian American woman. I was 29 when I moved out to France. There have been, of course, exchanges that I actually didn't expect. I was doe-eyed, but as Kelly Clarkson says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And what's also important is to kind of take those hits, if you want to call them hits, or just weird, there's ageism, there's misogynism, all of the isms that exist in everyday world, of course, exist in my world as well. We're farmers, but you can't let that bring you down. You can take us, and it's kind of like how we approach catastrophes here. We've been really lucky in 26. We've escaped all of them, but in years where we get hit, we're going to take a half a day to wallow, and then we're just going to keep on going and keep our spirits up, because you get mad, you get sad, but it's you're the one that takes the hits. Then you're doing that to yourself, right?
Yeah.
You got to be okay with yourself. You have to make sure that you're making decisions, and words matter. Make those decisions because they're the right ones, or because you've thought about why, so you don't look back and you regret, but you can learn if you're mistaken. All of that kind of goes into that's sort of the MO out here. The biggest change was my way of thinking versus the French way of thinking. It took more getting used to my East Coast way of thinking. The Vouvray way of thinking was very different, and that took more getting used to, but now I'm so used to it. And to be very honest, going back stateside it gets a little overwhelming sometimes.
I was going to ask that. I could imagine that could be complicated coming back here.
A little bit. I'm not used to hit and run dinners, for example. I'm like, what do you mean? It's been like an hour. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And it's not that one's better than the other. It's just...
No, they're just completely different. Yeah.
Right.
Right. And that's the whole thing. I consider myself really, truly, it's lucky.
It's great. Good for you. I'm very happy for you. Sarah, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Before we go, I have 3 questions I ask all guests that I'd like to ask you. Please share an early wine memory that drew you into wine.
The earliest, most impactful wine memories are with my family. Of course, there are wines that have been opened and enjoyed, and they're once-in-a-lifetime ones. But yeah, and then other than that, I don't know if it's the earliest, but one of the most crazy ones was when I was in Madeira at Oliveras, and they said, oh yeah, we've been meaning, this was a few years ago, they said, we've been meaning to bottle some 1850s, but we forgot, right?
Thank you for sharing that. Please share a breakout moment at Domaine Huet where you knew you had done something special.
The easy answer would be the 25 vintage, just seeing what was in front of us and just, but at the same time, that's not our work. That's the vines. It's actually in a recent vintage, we were all together as a team and laughing and everything, and we were trying the wines of the vintage. And there were a few days that were really, really hard during harvest and sorting and stuff. And one of the guys on our team, who some might say, definitely would say, is maybe the crankiest on the team, said, hold on, stop, everybody just take a second, because we're having fun, but can we just recognize that what we have in the glass is special? And it's a wine that nobody would be like, oh, this is the wine. But for us, he said, can we think about the day that we harvested this, or the days that we harvested this, and what was in front of us on the sorting table? And for that to turn into this, like, that's special, and that's all of us, right? And especially out here, compliments and reflections like that don't come often in general. So I would say that was probably that moment where you're like, okay, this is special, because he felt impelled to say that, comfortable to say that. And everybody on the team was like, well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's special. That's really special. And finally, please share one piece of advice for someone who feels they don't belong in wine.
Oh my God. I've had people, and I've spoken to them, and they're like, I'm not sophisticated enough. It makes me angry to hear that. I get very frustrated, because that's not what wine is. Wine's sharing. And oftentimes the people that don't know anything taste the best, because there's no pretension in terms of, I might say the wrong thing. You say whatever you want. And there's so many people that taste, what I tell them is, there's so many people that taste so many different ways, by color, by moments, by smells, by sounds. You can relate it to whatever you know, and that's okay. And that's the beauty of it. The only advice I say is, or what I tell people is, nobody's going out of their way to make something that you're not going to like. So if you don't like it, it's not your preference.
And that's okay.
It's not for you. And that's okay. but it might be for someone else. There is no belonging in wine. I think that that's the thing. I think that but that's a human thing. We want to be part of a crew. We want to be accepted. But in the wine world, there's so much. There's so many different ways of farming, of producing, of vinification, all the different, and that's why my family's in this, because all the variables are always changing. It is exactly like the universe. Nobody knows anything. And that's what I tell people. It's if somebody's in front of you saying that they know everything, you know more than them. I reject the idea of somebody saying that they don't know anything or they don't belong in wine. And then people are like, no, it's just the taste or it's the heartburn. Okay, well, or maybe it's just the bottle you drank, or maybe it's just the day
or the person
people you were with.
Yeah,
exactly. Just keep at it. But also, there's nothing wrong with drinking beer.
Yep.
Do you?
Sarah, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you doing this. It's been a wonderful conversation. Your wines are truly, truly some of the most amazing wines in the world. So keep up the great work. Thank you very much.
That's very nice of you.
This podcast is sponsored by the Durant Corkscrew. If you enjoy mature wine as much as I do, you know how challenging older corks can be. Even with experience, they don't always cooperate. I still remember the first time I saw a Durant in use back in 2012. I was gobsmacked. It solved a problem I and every serious wine drinker has faced. It is as close to foolproof as I've ever found for opening bottles of wine with older corks, and now I keep 3 of them on hand. Here at Uncorking What's Next, we're giving a Durant away. Just share with me the story of what made you fall in love with wine. You can share it by email or Instagram. Over the summer, we'll be picking the best story to share on the podcast, and that person will win a Durant. And if you'd rather not wait, you can order the Durant directly at www.thedurant.com. Well, you've made it to the end of the episode. Thank you for listening all the way through. I've already gotten some nice feedback, which I greatly appreciate. And I also want to welcome your feedback as well. Please email me or send me a message on LinkedIn or Instagram. Share with me if you like the show, what I can do better, and any guests or subjects you think would be interested. I'm really curious. Plus, if you like the show, I will be grateful if you rate it. I, Jeff Zacharia, am the producer of this show. I'm still connected with Zacky's Auctions as a consultant and auctioneer and helping to bring in consignments. But this podcast is not in any way connected with Zacky's. I also want to thank everyone who's made this podcast possible. I want to thank my daughter, Josephine Zacharia, my son and his wife, Tom and Alyssa Zacharia. All 3 are in the wine business, and I'm grateful for their thoughts and insights. My good friend, Christian Kuipers, for the artwork. My daughter by choice, Hannah Tobias, for the music. Soraya Perry, editor. Amelia Lankus, social media and marketing. My YPO Forum for the continued encouragement to step out of my comfort zone and make this podcast. And finally, for my amazing wife, Frederique, for her continued and constant support. Thank you.